Okay, so imagine this. In a huge global crisis, everyone is asked to take a small risk, for the good of the whole community. But what happens if you're one of the few where that small risk turns into something really serious, something life-changing? That's what we're tackling today. It's this deep ethical question at the very heart of what we owe each other.
Right, so this is the question, isn't it? If the government, the state, asks you, urges you to get a vaccine to protect everyone, what does it owe you specifically if you're the one who gets unlucky? It's a huge deal, and we saw this play out all across the world.
I mean, think about it. The COVID-19 pandemic kicked governments into absolute overdrive. You had campaigns like Israel's Lend a Shoulder, which was just one of the fastest vaccine rollouts ever. But that incredible speed, that massive scale, it brought this enormous challenge right to the surface. How in the world do you balance the desperate need to keep everyone safe with the basic rights of each person?
So this put every single government, every public health agency, right in the middle of a huge ethical tug-of-war. And you can really boil it down to two big competing ideas. Okay, so on one side, you've got the collective good. The goal is simple, right? Get to community immunity as fast as possible. That means fewer people getting sick, less pressure on our hospitals, and hopefully getting back to some kind of normal. But then, on the other side, you have the fundamental right of every individual to control what happens to their own body, to make their own medical decisions without being forced. And this wasn't some academic debate, was it? No way. This was the real, messy stuff at the heart of every argument about vaccine mandates, green passes, and the question of vaccinating kids.
So when you're facing a conflict this big, how do you even begin to decide what the right thing to do is? Well, policymakers don't just invent answers from scratch. They often turn to these long-standing philosophical ideas about what justice actually means.
And really, they boil down to two totally different ways of seeing the problem. First up, you've got utilitarianism, which is all about the greater good. It basically asks one question: what action helps the most people? From that perspective, a policy that saves millions of lives, even if it has a negative impact on a very small number, might look like a win. But then you have a completely different angle, a rights-based approach. This idea, which got a huge boost from philosophers like John Rawls, totally flips the script. It says, hang on. Before we do anything, we have to look at how this will affect the most vulnerable people in our society, the ones with the fewest advantages.
And this leads us straight to this really important concept: health justice. Now, this is way more than just being able to see a doctor when you're sick. It's a much, much bigger idea. It's the belief that a truly just society has a duty to actively tear down the barriers, the economic ones, the social ones, that stop people from being healthy. It's about making sure every single person has a fair shot at a healthy life.
And this quote from John Rawls really nails that rights-based view. He came up with this amazing thought experiment. He called it the veil of ignorance. He said, imagine you get to design society from scratch, but here's the catch: you don't know who you're going to be. You could be rich, you could be poor, born healthy, or with challenges. Rawls argued that if we were all in that position, we'd create rules that protect the people who end up in the worst off spot. So when you apply that thinking here, the question just stares you in the face. What do we owe the person who takes one for the team, so to speak, and ends up harmed?
Okay, so that's the philosophy. But how does all that theory translate into actual real-world legal responsibility? Let's walk through the playbook that states actually used.
When a crisis hits, the normal rulebook basically gets thrown out the window. Clinical trials that usually take a decade, they get crammed into a single year. Regulators start issuing what are called emergency use authorizations, constantly trying to balance the need for speed with the need for safety. The whole system is designed for one thing: velocity. But that speed, it creates a massive responsibility for that last step. Watching like a hawk after the rollout to catch those super rare side effects that the fast-track trials were never going to find.
So to handle this huge responsibility, a lot of countries have a special tool in their toolkit. It's called a no-fault compensation system. And this is a really critical idea to get your head around. Basically, it means that if someone is harmed, they don't have to go through this crazy long, super expensive court battle to prove that a doctor or a company was negligent. The whole point is to create a more direct way to get support to the people who need it. It's a safety net designed to give everyone the confidence to participate in these big public health campaigns.
Yeah, you can really think of it like a social contract. The state says, hey, please get this vaccine for the good of all of us. In return, it promises if something goes wrong, we've got a system to take care of you. But, and this is a huge but, here's the catch. Those emergency measures that speed everything up, they almost always give legal protection or immunity to the manufacturers. And these liability shields, they're there to encourage companies to move fast, but they also mean that for a lot of people, the regular court system is no longer an option. That makes these no-fault programs pretty much the only game in town.
All right, so how do different countries actually make good on this social contract? Well, as you might guess, the approaches are all over the map. And looking at them really shows you the different choices and trade-offs that governments have to make.
So if you look at how this breaks down, you can see these trade-offs in action. Take funding, for instance. In the US, the money comes from a small tax on every vaccine dose. In Scandinavia, it just comes from the general state budget. And then there's the burden of proof. That's a huge one. This is about how much evidence you need to provide. In places like the US and Israel, the bar's pretty high. You really have to prove the vaccine caused the injury. But in Scandinavia, it's often a lower bar, more like a balance of probabilities. And that one difference, it has a massive impact on who actually gets help and what kind of help they get.
So, okay, with all these different systems, how well do they actually work for people? Well, this next number, it's pretty staggering. Some studies suggest that in certain systems, an estimated 30% of reported vaccine injuries just don't meet the very specific, very narrow legal definitions they need to qualify for any compensation.
Yeah, that 30% figure, it really gets to the absolute core of this health justice challenge. Think about what that means. A person can be genuinely, truly harmed, but if their specific injury doesn't fit neatly into some pre-approved legal box, if it's a condition that isn't on an official list, for example, they can be left completely on their own with no support at all. That gap right there between what a person actually experiences and what the law is willing to recognize, that's where the social contract can really start to fray.
So, looking at all these challenges, it's not just about pointing fingers or dwelling on the past. The whole point is to figure out how we can build a stronger, more trustworthy system for the next public health crisis. Because, let's be real, we all know there's going to be a next one.
So let's boil it all down. What are the big takeaways? First, this clash between the public good and individual rights, it's not going away. It's just part of the deal in a pandemic. Second, the choices a country makes on ethics and law have huge, real-world consequences for people who get hurt. Third, these no-fault systems are a key tool, but how they're designed, that's everything. And finally, none of this works without transparency. That's the foundation of public trust. And maybe the biggest lesson is that there's no magic bullet, no single perfect way to do this. It's all just a series of incredibly tough trade-offs.
And all of this leaves us staring at one final, critical question. We've seen what happened. The lessons from the pandemic are crystal clear. We know where the gaps are. We know the challenges. We've seen the ethical tightrope everyone was walking. So the real work, it starts right now. How do we take everything we've learned, all these hard-won lessons, and use them to design a system that isn't just fast, but is also fairer and more transparent for the next time we're all asked to step up for the common good?